Alright, hello everyone. My name is Disc, and in this video we have a 22 Halls of Valor, and it was a pretty good key for us. I think this will be the second Halls of Valor on my channel, but this one we definitely have some good examples of what to do and what not to do. But before we get going here, let's talk about a couple of things. And first, let's just flash these talents. So I will say with my last 2 weeks, I did try different specs. And I thought that, maybe Twilight Equilibrium was the right play when trying to maximize damage. So I went for this, which means I think you definitely drop Mind Games. And I tried going this Vampiric Embrace route, and it just wasn't for me. I think maybe Twilight Equilibrium you can come out slightly ahead on damage, but I just don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. It is a really hard talent to manage. It takes a lot of your attention span, and I noticed my DPS wasn't coming out ahead because I was spending more time thinking about what to cast rather than just casting. And yeah, I just think there's a lot of power in controlling your own rotation based on what you have. I think that's where a lot of skill comes in. And I don't want to modify my rotation constantly with Twilight Equilibrium. And I know there's an argument where you can just piss into the wind with it, but I don't want to do it. So I'm dropping that. I'm staying Mind Games. Crystalline Reflection is pretty much my favorite talent. I think you can get a lot out of it and really maximize on it with our 4-piece, which is great for Train of Thought. So I think the argument here would be to put your point like this, but I just think Train of Thought is so good. Penance is our hardest hitter. It is kind of our most important spell, and this lets us have more of it, which, interacts with our 4-piece. I just think it's great. And then if you're new here, nothing's changed, but I do run for the 15-second duration of my buff window. That's Long Schism, Long Shadow Covenant. And I do run Rapture. And yeah, I don't take double Paints Up, and I don't take anything with my Radiance. I think this is a fine play. I think there are places within our build that you can go more defensive. But I will say, I'm going to give a big shout out and thanks to Yasmin the tank here, because I'm starting to think more and more, if it weren't for him as an off-healer, this spec would be not as viable. But I think having a strong off-healer, a big part of his rotation is casting his Words of Glory, or whatever they're called. And I just think that pairs so well with Discipline, and he's so good at it. It kind of allows me to go a little more for DPS. So I think this is a good build. I think it has weaknesses to it, but I kind of look to Yasmin to fill those gaps. And I definitely think it only matters more once we're getting into the higher keys, like 22 plus. But I do think this is a strong build. Maybe use it with caution unless you have a Paladin tank. But yeah, so that's all I want to say about talents. And then another thing is real quick, potions. I've been trying to get better and better with using my potions. I think in these higher keys, the more you can push, it's exponentially, it gives your group a better advantage. So I don't think I need mana potions too often, but I try and use my Shocking Disclosure instead. I think that's a really nice way to up your DPS as a Disc Priest, which is always fun. And the last thing I wanted to talk about in this video is probably the biggest improvement to my gameplay I've ever had. And it is thanks to someone in the comment section last week saying, why are you not utilizing focus targets to find your schism? And it just dawned on me that that is what my gameplay was missing. And I knew that functionality was out there, but didn't really know how to apply it to Discipline. Honestly, I thought it was something better utilized for kick classes. But this was just the best idea, and it took me a little bit of time to figure it out through trial and error, but I've landed in a really good place, and I want to explain that to everybody. So first, I want to say all of my spells and keybinds are exactly the same. They default to my target. But so then the question is, how do we apply our focus? And I have just macroed that right into my schism here, really easy. So that sets my focus, but all of my spells are still going to hit my target. And I think that's really important, except for Mind Blast. So this is our hardest hitter, and we definitely want it to hit the schism. You know, someone could argue you can just cast Mind Blast on anyone and you're getting the Torment at least. But Mind Blast being such a strong spell, we want it to go to our schism. And we can do that by setting our schism with a focus. So I will say my Mind Blasts, I have 2 of them here. They are both mouse button 4. They've always just been that for me, but they have different modifiers. So I definitely want to be able to hit Mind Blast on my target reliably, but I also want to be able to hit my schism reliably. So different situations, same keybind, different modifier. And what I've done here, I think the best way to do it, I have my Mind Blast set to change my target to the focus. So a focus target, you don't have to target them. The spell will still default there, but it just kind of messes with my brain a little bit. So I add this line in just to go ahead and change my target back to the focus. And then that is where my Mind Blast is going to go. And you can just type that in. That's kind of like code for if focus exists, hit the focus, if not, hit the target. But yeah, I have a @target one just as a side note. But the most important thing here is I think adding this switch the target back to focus is the right play, because we want our other spells to go to the schism as well. And this is just a nice way of resetting your target back to your focus so that all of your spells are hitting your schism. And then so for Mind Blast, I have 2 different keybinds, one with a modifier, a different modifier. And then I also have built my mind games this way to switch my target back to focus and default the attack to the focus. So I used to have this on every spell, and that was a little bit overkill. I've limited it to the Mind Games and Mind Blast, and I think those are really the only 2 ways, or the 2 macros you need to kind of like reset your target. But I do also have one for my dot. It's used the least, but I have used it some. But this dot will reset my target to my focus and attack the focus. But yeah, so all this is mainly just to improve efficiency. We want to be taking actions out of our hands as much as we can. Less clicks, less keybinds. And if we're really trying to maximize our spec and attack our schism target, this @focus is really going to help. So now that we've built this entire focus target system, one which sets our focus with our schism, and one that returns our attacks to the focus and changes our target back to the focus too, all of this is a system in order to improve our efficiency with Mindbender. So when you're trying to maximize Mindbender, not only is it really important you're attacking your schism target, it's really important that you're trying to pick up a 5th torment off of an execute range. So the best way to do that as a disc priest is just to change your targets to snipe the execute with your Shadow Word Death. But then it's really important that we can just return to our schism seamlessly in a really streamlined manner. And that's where our focus target is going to come in. So we can switch our targets, we can snipe our execute range, and then go right back to attacking our schism without having to fumble around manually selecting them. And the reason I think this is so helpful is I noticed, and I still do it some, but when you're fumbling to reselect your schism target, I noticed I was dropping torments due to the fumbling. So with a focus system like this, you can just go immediately back to your schism target and cut out all fumbling. So it's whenever you have moments where you're not casting at all, that's bad. You want to aim for as much uptime casting as possible. And then the last thing I want to talk about here is, so we've talked about everything with focus targeting, except for one really important thing is we need to know who to attack, who to focus. And I have this system in place with KUI Nameplates, where it's a 3-tiered system with a dark red full opacity being biggest threat, medium red full opacity, medium threat, and then half opacity is least threat. So I do think in most pulls, it's just fine if you're attacking and putting your schism on the healthiest mob. I think some pulls might have exceptions, but for this case, the dragon is a great focus target. So I use my dark red color to help guide me to where I need to attack. And that is how we use focus targeting in Schism. So it's a pretty easy system to get used to, especially since I've done the trial and error for you guys. But if you have any specific questions about this, if it didn't make sense, please ask in the comment section. I'm in pretty good habit of answering people's specific questions the best I can. But we have quite a few examples in this key of where we're using my focus macro to really improve efficiency. We're trying to get all of our torments in. And again, baseline, you should be getting 4 torments, and aiming for that 5th off the execute is optimal. So anyway, I think that's just about everything I wanted to talk about. So let's go ahead and clip over. All right, so here we go. We have 22 Halls of Valor. This is a total pug except for Yasmin and myself. And off the top, it's always a good idea to start planning where you're going to place your PIs. And in a group like this, Rogue is bottom priority. Their spec just does not gain much benefit from haste. So we're looking at the Druid and or the Hunter. And a couple things to note here is the Druid's Incarn is 3 minutes to our 2 minutes. And then the Hunter is 1.5 minutes to our 2 minutes. So we're not really going to have perfect PIs here, but we're going to try and maximize on our uptime as much as we can, bouncing between those two guys. And I will say right off the top here, we are going for a triple.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So being that we're raging, a good rule of thumb is backload your cooldowns in a pull. So I'm trying to follow my tank. Going on the left side with him. He's gathering, so no one's touching anything. Open with Fade. And it paints up. Just to ease the transition. PI out on our cat. And as my opener, I'm getting all my dots out. And I will say this was a really bad pull for me. This is definitely a shocking disclosure pull, and I forgot mine. I think this was the first key of the day, but yeah, I forgot it. And then my first Shadow Covenant there was a total miss. I got Shadow locked in it after a full ramp, so it felt really bad. But the best thing you can do is keep moving. Everyone is raging, so I threw down a barrier over there for our tank. And outside of Shadow Covenant, really the best you can do is dot and star. And you'll see that dispel there. It starts as a dotted blue line and changes to a solid dotted line to solid line. And that indicates the cast and the dispel. And those are based just off of auras. Alright, so here we go. No cooldowns are available, so we just have to manually get through it for a moment.
5, 4.
It is always a nice play to use your single shield on yourself. Makes you quite a bit more tanky. So I'm waiting for the move. I have my Harsh Discipline banked with a +1. And now that we've moved, I unload. Mindbender, Shadow Covenant Schism, Mind Blast Penance. And with Quaking, we have quite a few instant casts. So it's always nice to place those there. And for this Horn of Valor, that's pretty much all I'm tracking with bigwigs. This is our Rapture. Everyone was covered. And at this point, we're back to farming our Harsh Discipline, getting a proc with a +1. waiting for the move, and unload.
Five, four, three.
And also as a sequence, trying to play to our two-piece a little bit. After my first Dark Reprimand, I work in a buffed shield, usually on the tank. Sometimes I default to myself, but I work in a buffed shield, which buffs my next single target spell, and I cast Mind Games. So, Mindbender, Shadow Covenant, Schism, Mind Blast Penance, Shield, Mind Games. That's like, in my opinion right now, the best opener. And then once you get through that sequence of like, what is that, 6 spells, you have a little bit more freedom. But again, we're aiming for at least 3 Mind Blasts, 1 Shadow Word Death, 2 if there's an execute range, and 2 large Dark Reprimands. That is the easiest spell to drop, and it's going to be one of our best damage dealers, is that second Dark Reprimand, which is also going to interact with our 4-piece. So in these pulls, I do track the Holy Radiance. That is a fear opportunity, but our tank is on it. And ramping with my dots. Since I missed my potion on pull 1, I'm going to make up for it here. Dots are out. Yeah, and this wasn't my best Shadow Covenant. I did not have a full Harsh Discipline ramp with a +1, and I missed my execute. So someone would have to count that, but I think I only got 3 of my 4 torments and only 1 of my penance. Not the best. So going into next pull, we have PI. Everything is ready. Mind Soothe is great in these hallways. I don't know what the rogue is doing. And laying down a feather is always really pro. I think the best way to earn your keep in a key is with utility more than anything. So playing your utility spells. Hunter is pulling the group, and I gripped him back to safety. So ramping with all of my dots. Get a Dispel out. Ramping my Harsh Discipline, we're almost there. And here we go. Grabbed the 5th Torment. And that was a much better Shadow Covenant. So I did miss my second Dark Reprimand, but I got all of my Torments and a +1 Torment. 5 Torments. And that dot can hurt pretty bad. It's not a bad idea to prioritize that Dispel. We see a red dotted line on our tank. That's for a bleed.
2.
That was a good pull. Moving on. Again, Mind Soothe in this hallway is needed on everybody. Ramping with all of my dots. And you'll see here we start getting, we had it in the last pull, but gray nameplates. So in my system, yikes, things are getting out of hand. In my system, I have everything as red, except for a couple that are gray, and those are guys that cleave. Yeah, so things were a little bit nasty here, so I pain supped, and I had to just get into my Shadow Covenant as quickly as possible. Sometimes the best play is to sacrifice a full Harsh Discipline ramp. And that's what I did there. I had to get into my Shadow Covenant. I had to forfeit a full ramp. Sometimes you gotta do it.
From these sacred halls, my sense. The ritual is not yet complete.
5, 4.
Alright, so going into next pull, we have a lot of spells. Alright, so we got cleave mobs here. And I think we're going a double. PI's out on the Druid. Ramping dots. Ramping Harsh Discipline. And you can see where that advance attack goes with the targeted spells weak aura. I think depending on the situation, LOSing it might be nice. But I like to see it as well just so I can shield it off. Here's my next Shadow Covenant. Was also a bad Shadow Covenant. So we lost LOS there due to the pathing.
5, 4, 3, 2.
And the tank is hurting. I'm just giving him a little bit of priority here. Alright, this pull is just about over. So I have watched this ahead of time. In the next section of this key, I did not play well. I think this was the first key of the day, and I really just wasn't planning out my spells appropriately. But on this first guy's storm attack, it is fortified. So on the very first one should cue our barrier, and we should also wall. But we definitely want a Harsh Discipline stack with a +1 and a full group of atonements. Working a Radiance. Gave myself that really nice shield just to stabilize.
5.
And that was really bad. So the only reason we got through that primarily is because of Yasmin. I did not play appropriately. Let's see how this one does. Yeah, so I laid barrier here. I should have laid barrier first just to get it on cooldown. But I do that better once the boss comes. But what happened on that first one is my Mindbender, my Shadow Covenant, nor my Schism were out by the time we entered that DPS phase, that damage phase. So if your Mindbender is not out yet, you're already late. The Eye of the Storm is a 9-second attack, and your Shadow Covenant Schism is 15. So you want to get into it a little bit early just so you're not caught off guard. And you have to pretty much have your Mindbender, Shadow Covenant, and Schism already out ahead of time before the Eye of the Storm. And you'll notice on the first Eye of the Storm back there where I was late, it put the group in a real pickle. And then just pretend this doesn't happen. So I will also say with the boss, we have 2 rounds of the Eye of the Storm. The way I see it, no matter if it's Fortified or Tyrannical, your first Eye of the Storm you wall or paints up, and your second Eye of the Storm you wall or paints up yourself. So all you really have to do is make sure you have Harsh Discipline procced +1, atonements in the group, work in a Radiance into your window, and with that defensive, that's all the group needs. So I'm pre-casting my Mindbender, Shadow Covenant, and here we go. Schism. Working a Radiance at the top just to make sure everyone is covered. And I shielded myself there. Better play would have been to shield the tank. There is always a tank buster coming out of that phase, but I got a little bit low, shielded myself. Looks like it went to waste ultimately. But on that Eye of the Storm there, I did not wall. Should have walled, but I did not wall. And that's why I got a little bit low. I had Blessing of Sacrifice from Yasmin, but I needed my wall too. So in this phase, we don't want to use any big spells. We just want to pump our regular DPS. And for this round, I'm opening with Rapture. I already have my Harsh Discipline procced. There goes my Mindbender Shadow Covenant. And I'm already healing by the time the damage comes out. Working a Radiance. And cap Yasmin with a nice shield there. And that was a lot better than the first 3. So that's how they should go. You need to get into your window a little bit early. And at the end of the phase, always anticipate a tank slam. I don't think Paints Up is necessary for that. As long as you can give him a nice procced 4-piece shield, that is all he needs to mitigate that spike damage. And that attack is something that is loaded into the targeted spell's weak aura. So model your pattern after the 4th one, not the first 3. The only reason we got through this, honestly, was because of Yasmin. But I do think with this build and discipline, you can completely handle it even without Vampiric Embrace. It just really demands you're on top of your rotation and on top of your timings. And yeah, so with Big Wigs, all you really need to track is that one thing, and you're set. So here's a Mind Soothe, and I will let you know this is where we have a little bit of a whoopsie doopsie. Yeah. So it was just like an honest mistake, an accident, if you will. But that big guy was a little too close, and Yasmin's shield bounced over to him. So our call and party, our Pug Hunter, is saying, let's reset, reset. I'm in Discord with Yasmin saying, what do you want to do? And we opt for just the reset. So we do time this key, I'll let you know right now. So it just goes to show that keys, most keys have a little wiggle room for mistake. But the best thing you can do is just hustle. Get on your mount, run back. As the crow flies, shortest line of distance. Possibly Mind Soothe that guy for your team. But we're moving on. And so also Yasmin just died. And we're in Discord together and I'm saying, don't release, don't release. I've already lapped you. So I'm going to come in for the res. It's a real bitch when you've already been running back for like 45 seconds and you've lapped someone and then they release. Really sad. So I was telling him, don't release, I've already lapped you. Here we go. And I think it's always a good idea to res forward. Don't res backwards. Alright, we're trying this again. Fade. Mind Soothe those guys. Holy Word Life there for the win. It's kind of a tricky spell for me to use, considering I'm competing with Yasmin's Words of Glory. But it's still a nice spell. And it was kind of recently I changed my Grid 2 to have that red color at 30, I think 2% instead of 35. I wanted to give myself just a little bit of lenience. So I dropped that percent by a couple points. And I think that was a really bad Shadow Covenant as well. It was my first key. I was taking a little bit of time to warm up to it. I promise I'm a lot better at Shadow Covenant than this. I mean, they're not bad, but they're not maximized. I'm missing a lot of my torments. I'm missing a lot of my penances, my peneyes. But here we go. If you don't know this strategy, the big dragon can eat the deer and you gain a little bit of percent. Helps the route some way. So the hunter here, notice I have his party nameplate showing. He's on the perch. He's targeted. Rip him down. So whenever a hunter is standing on a perch like that, they honestly are just asking for it. So he had it coming. And definitely with that targeted attack at him. Nice just to grip him down to safety. And that Shadow Covenant was a lot better. I got all my Torments, and I got both Dark Reprimand. That's the big one. And I'm noticing a lot when it comes to Shadow Covenant, we have about one global of wiggle room to do something else or have variants. And I'm trying to add in a shield into the middle just to benefit from my 4-piece. But sometimes if you're going to miss a Torment, it's better not to vary. Depending on the situation, yeah, sometimes you want to favor single target, sometimes you want to favor the AoE. Just got to modify on the fly. But for this pull, it is going to take a little bit of time, so PI's out. This is also a shocking disclosure pull, just to get my potion rolling again. And those large AoE stomps, you saw the first one, you can interrupt that with your Fear Bomb. Really nice way to use Fear. Yeah, and that was just a pretty standard Shadow Covenant. I think they're getting better. I'd have to replay to catch the actual sequence there. But I think I got all my spells finally. I love druids that have punt. I actually have a little bit of FOMO with Shining Force. I do miss that spell. Alright, so going into this guy, non-tyrannical. Fade for some movement. Give a Mind Soothe for those guys just for a second. And first is always a leap, so no need to really drop cooldowns yet. But we did have a bleed share there, so that's not good. Atonements are out. And we're getting into our Shadow Covenant. And this was one where I sacrificed my second Dark Reprimand on purpose. Just because I needed the output. And for this one, if you play that back and look carefully, I was hovering my mouse central to my allies, and I was anticipating the frenzy with my finger hovering on barrier. And there is just enough time where if you react quick enough, you can lay your barrier before the Ravenous Frenzy hits. And for that one I Raptured. It's always a nice time to play Rapture after the leaps go out. One, it'll cover the bleed damage and keep people topped for the next frenzy. So, good time to play Rapture. I really don't think our spellbook struggles with this boss. A solid option you always have is just to precast a Radiance. And that does pretty good. But in this pull, it's always good to keep a shield on yourself. This is probably the most dangerous pull, so I opt for a Pain Sup on myself.
4, 3.
It looks like the Pain Sup got totally wasted, but that's fine. You want to get your large shields off of 4-piece and Harsh Discipline, and always give those to yourself. So I'm finding more and more I think that's the right play. And I think 3 of those jumps went on me, and they were all shielded. And that last one took me into the red through a shield. So yeah, I think as long as I'm alive, the pull will be okay. So I think opting to be a little bit of a tanky, shielded priest is just a really smart play. So with those single proc shields, there was another one, just give them to yourself. And not a bad idea here either, just to cast a Radiance every now and then. The lenience helps the group, and it also keeps the group covered. Another shield was 8 up. Good thing I had one. Refreshed another full shield on myself.
Five, 4.
That one went to waste. Sad. That was huge. But here we go. Boss. So we have a really good play here. This is just about as good as it could have gone. So I'm ramping my Harsh Discipline. Star when the ads come out. We're expecting this first leap. And that is where Rogue earned the MVP. So furthest target gets the attack. And he prevented it. So for the first Frenzy, I really just want to get my Shadow Covenant rolling. So I covered the group there and it covered the first Frenzy. And now my cooldowns are rolling, so we're in a good spot. So I keep that Howl cast bar on my screen. I just want to make sure I see it. I just want to make sure I see it even if I'm not focusing or targeting Fenryr. So I bring it up on my screen. And for that Frenzy we had Rapture. It was actually meant for the leap, but our leap was mitigated again by the rogue. And for this Scent of Blood we had our Bop, which is great because I was in Shadow Covenant. I just wanted to DPS. And that was 5 Torments, 2 Penai. Exactly what we wanted. And that was the rogue canceling out another one. So, really good. So there we go. We have Dog and didn't even need Barrier. So we're moving on. We have plenty of time on the timer. But we have one more large pull here and it's a group of bears. So our Shocking Disclosure is available again. This is going to be a great pull just to really dump everything we have. Always nice to open with Fade just so you're not on the aggro table. There goes our Shocking Disclosure. We can see a bleed on our tank. Good idea to keep a Renew. Ramping my Harsh Discipline. Waiting for the whole group to join. I refresh my Atonements with a Flash Heal. And go into Shadow Covenant. So at the very least, before you enter a Shadow Covenant, you need to Flash Heal your tank. And that will put Atonements on the 2 most important people in the group, tank and healer. And I think this was a really good Shadow Covenant. I picked out my 5th Torment off of an Execute, using my Focus Target macros to return to my Schism. But the best Shadow Covenant for a group is going to be one where you don't have to break for Atonements more than once, worst case scenario. So in the middle of a Shadow Covenant, often I'm casting a buffed shield, or I'm casting a Radiance, or if no one needs anything, I don't cast anything. So the most DPS is going to come from not breaking from Shadow Covenant for healing spells. And the best way you can set yourself up for that type of scenario is with a Flash Heal very last before Shadow Covenant. So Flash Heal the tank, atones you and the tank, and then you just DPS. So we have just about 12 minutes left. We have a rogue in the group. I'm tossing out Mind Soothes, and we shroud on through. So always glance at spells in between pulls, and we have PI available. So we definitely want to roll that as soon as we get up here. I'm glancing at the overall damage done, and our Feral is on top. So in a case like this, where his Incarn will be available in just a moment here, I'm going to reward him with the PI. And in this room, we have a lot of opportunities to really maximize on our shield with the targeted spells Weakara. We have targeted spells coming from the Kings and the boss. So we are playing the beer strat. Really saves a lot of time. There's our PI, ramping our Harsh Discipline. Proc +1, fresh dot, fresh atonements. Mindbender, Shadow Covenant Schism. Mind Blast Penance. Shield, Mind Games. So at that point, we are really just set for success. We got all the spells we needed. Maximum DPS.
5, 4.
And you'll see in group, now that we're over here, we get this attack that goes out on random party members called a Jagged Dagger, a Wicked Dagger. It is probably the quickest attack in the game, but I think it's fun for like the sport of it, trying to get ahead of it with a shield. Oop, missed that one. But the reason it's good to get ahead of the Wicked Dagger with a shield is because it leaves a debuff behind which reduces healing. So even though the healing reduction isn't a big deal, it is nice just to prevent the spike damage. And that one on the Hunter, I got it. I shielded him in time, but he avoided it. So it is a really quick attack, but it is nice to kind of try and get him. Oh, missed it. Going into a Shadow Covenant here. Grabbed my Execute.
5, 4, 3.
So in a case like that where I grabbed an extra global with an Execute, I'm trying to drop that heal in the middle of my Shadow Covenant. So normally I would cast a shield in the middle, at least a shield, but since I had the extra global for the extra death, drop that shield. Missed that dagger too. It's really not a problem. I'm not even healing him. Yasmin is. But I think it's 50% reduced healing. I think I get one here at the end. I think it was on the Druid, if you keep an eye on the Druid. There's my 4-piece proc. Druid's targeted, shielded. So it's, I think, more just kind of the fun of it. You don't need to get ahead with a shield, but it is a really nice place to play your shield, and it really kind of hones your skill to be quick and ready and reactionary. And yeah, shields for the win. So here we go. We have last two bosses. Both are non-tyrannical. First boss is not a problem, but we do have some opportunities to shield ahead of a targeted attack with that weak aura. So here we see a dotted line indicating the cast and a solid line indicating the dot. And this is not a dot you can dispel, it's just a heal indicator. And you'll see I got ahead of it with a shield. So I got really spooked with that Quaking there, and I missed my last two torments. That's really sad. But it's really nice to track that cast here. Even on Fortified, it can spike someone's health quite low. So when the Flames of Woe come out, great time for Star, great time for Penance to spread your dot. So I shielded it and he evasioned, or he did something there. Here's our PI on the Druid, just came available. And so for that attack, I missed getting ahead of the front end of the damage, but a shield after the damage will get fully used too. It's just you didn't prevent the spike, but that's okay. So before the attack is ideal, after the attack, you still get full value. And you always want to be casting something if you can. You never want downtime between your casting. And that's because even if you're only spamming Smite, you're farming the seconds off your Mindbender. Shielded the front end of that attack. Boss is almost dead, farming Harsh Discipline with a +1. Flash heal. Mindbender, Shadow Covenant, Schism, Mind Blast, Penance, Shield, Mind Games. And that's like the optimal rotation right now. And then it frees up after that. So I believe I got 5 Torments there. Maybe only 1 Penance. And that was boss 4? Boss 4 down. 1 boss left. And one thing I'll say while we wait is I've noticed the Mindbender does not extend his duration if you cast your Torment spells when he's like under 1 second in duration. So I think sometimes favoring the Torment spells instead of refreshing a dot for expiation it's just the right play to make sure your torments land and extend the duration of that Mindbender. And with this guy, I'm really only tracking one item in Bigwigs. That is the Runic Brand. PI's up, Pain Sub's up, Barrier, Rapture, we got it all. Alright, Opener is always a dot. Farming my Harsh Discipline. A great way to farm your Harsh Discipline is just to go ahead and put both your Mind Blasts on cooldown. That is going to be one of our best spells, regardless if you're in Shadow Covenant or not. And I had some Atonements out, just anticipating this damage. My first Shadow Covenant is all I needed to take care of that. And Runic Brand is coming in 10 seconds. This is our Rapture queue. Except I'm Holy Locked. So going into my Rapture, I open with a Radiance that tops the group and lets my Rapture benefit from my Mastery. And I would have liked to have cast that a little bit sooner, but it looks like I still almost got full value. So ramping my Harsh Discipline, keeping the group fully atoned. Here's our Mindbender, Shadow Covenant, Schism. And that shield that I dropped on the rogue right there, most often I would give that shield to myself or the tank, but his atonement fell off. So that was a great way to just recover the group, fill in that missed atonement. And for this one, I should have had Barrier down, and it's a good thing no one died, but always precasting Radiance is the play there as well. And for this one, I wall and paints up myself. Great way to reserve those spells. I kind of look at Paints Up as a personal defensive that I can choose to give to other people if I feel like it. And for that one, I gave myself a single shield. And we're just pumping. And boss down. Yikes. Almost had death there. But that was plus 10. And since this day has passed, I'm now over 2,900, which I'm really proud about. And that was a really, well, it was a pretty clean 22 Halls of Valor. And I'm having a ton of fun playing with Yasmin. I think Paladins just pair so beautifully with Priests. And I really appreciate everyone watching. So in conclusion, I think the biggest game changer since my last video is I've started using my focus target functionality. I think it is a great way to maximize on your Schism, and macroing it right into your Schism is just going to really improve your efficiency. And when it comes to gaming and high-end gaming, it's all about removing actions out of your gameplay and reducing the amount of work your hands have to do. So a focus target for your Schism is just going to be so perfect. And I made a lot of progress since recording this video, but I've made it a lot more streamlined and I'm a lot more consistent with it. And it's been quite a game changer for me so far. And I'm pretty excited to experiment and play with it more. But a good thing to do after your keys is always kind of analyze and review your meters. So the avoidable damage in the group was not amazing. I myself was over 1 million, which is a mark I don't ever like to cross. But it was a long dungeon, and getting to 1 million is actually pretty easy. But I think we all did our job on that front, and we have, you know, really nice shields on our end and a nice backup healer as the tank on the other side of it. But then looking at the damage output, we are right under 29,000 per second, and that is a really good number for us, considering a lot of my DPS windows were partial misses. So I'm noticing I'm getting over 30k quite consistently, depending on the dungeon. But this just was a little bit of a try-hard dungeon for me. But kind of looking at the meters here, I'm copy-pasting this onto my screen, so forgive the jankiness. But Purge the Wicked is always great to keep that rolling. Our Mind Blast is always a great driver, so no matter if you're in Shadow Covenant or not, roll your Mind Blast. Expiation, I think, is a talent that you can really maximize with some skill and some effort. I think the ceiling on that's pretty high as well. And then we see Dark Reprimand soaring way above our Penance. That's exactly where you want it to be. Our Inescapable Torments are doing really good. I've switched to Glacial Fury, which is nice. And then the only other thing I really look at is what was my Mind Games doing, which is 1.5 million. That's a good number. And what was my Crystalline Reflection doing, which is right at 1 million, which is exactly where you want it to be. And now that I have a little bit of gear, I'm having a lot more fun with the spec. I felt like pushing into 22s without gear to back it up really did affect the gameplay. I think you have to have the gear to support high keys, at least somewhat. But that's it for this key. But the last thing I want to do, if you're still listening, and this is the first time I've ever asked my audience to do something, but I have a call to action for everybody, and it's something that will help everybody. So I really would appreciate it if anyone who's watching, if you're a Disc Priest, to submit a bug report to the developers that Revel and Purity does not work. So this is a talent point that we kind of have to take, and it's a talent point we want to take, and we need it to do what it is intended to do. And it's supposed to spread a dot to 2 enemies, and often it spreads 0, and often it only spreads 1. So this is a compounding problem for us that it affects our mana, it affects our DPS, it affects our HPS, it affects our rotation. It is a large problem. And the reason I'm putting this in my video as a call to action for any Disc Priest or any priest is because the developers don't even know about it. So I submitted a ticket to a GM and told him about the problem, and he said he will report it, but he's looking at the notes and it's not recorded yet as a problem, which is a problem. So I think Disc Priests we're kind of in our renaissance. This is when they're really feeling good, and I think we're in a, where we've wanted to be all along, but we need this talent to work for us because it creates such a problem in our gameplay when we have a talent that is totally unreliable. So what we have to do to get this fixed, and this is part of just being a game player here, is we have to submit this bug to the developers. So this is a little bit different than submitting a ticket, which goes to a GM. We need to submit this bug to the developers, and you can do that. It's a one-way ticket with a bug report. So I think shorter is better, keep it short and sweet. But, if I could ask everyone who's watching this to please submit a bug report, just stating that our talent point called Revel and Purity is inconsistent and does not do what it says it does. And I think that'll help get their attention. And as soon as we can get this bug worked out of our talent tree, we will be in a lot better place. So anyway, thanks everyone for watching, and until next time, Disc out.